Hello and welcome to this very exciting RTS Q&A focusing on how content creators and audience trends inspire the commissioning strategy at YouTube Originals. So we're going to be delving into two YouTube Originals, and I'm Rhianna Dhillon. I'm going to be in conversation with Luke Hyams, who is commissioner for YouTube Originals. We'll be joined by directors Brian Hill and Kevin Batchelor, and YouTubers and presenters Andre Montgomery Johnson, aka Mr. Montgomery, and Ethan Payne, aka Behzinga, to talk about their documentaries, Terms and Conditions, a UK drill story, and How to Be Behzinga. So we have got a lot to get through in the next hour. If you've got any questions for any of our panelists, please put them in the Q&A box throughout the chat, and we'll come to them in about the last 15 minutes. Now, before we introduce our panelists, Luke, welcome, hello. Can you please give us a little bit of an overview of YouTube Originals and tell us all about its ambitions?
Absolutely. So YouTube Originals is an area of YouTube that focuses on partnering with British producers and YouTube creators and artists to create exciting premium programming experiences, moments on YouTube that make the YouTube viewing experience that bit richer. We take inspiration from the personalities, the trends, the formats that are really blowing up on YouTube, and see what we can do to partner with the people behind them to take their creative ambitions to to new heights for their audience. And every show we do allows us to delve into a different pocket of YouTube taste, because my vision of YouTube and the way the algorithm feeds me videos that I like, it's completely different from yours, Rhianna, or anyone else's. And so, it's not one of these things where we broadly speak to everybody at once. We do look at various different targeted audiences on YouTube, which I think makes it really interesting and quite different from any other sort of commissioning strategy that is out there right now. At the same time, as well, we are so lucky to have like the richness of the YouTube creators. We are in the middle of a revolution of creativity where people have used platforms like YouTube to tell their stories. And we have a few examples today, shows that we're going to get to, of times where we've looked at things that are really unique and special on the YouTube platform and found opportunities to build programs around those. And I think that, for me, is when we're taking stuff that already exists on YouTube to new heights, is when YouTube Originals really works.
So what prompted YouTube Originals to commission the first documentary we'll be talking about, exploring the subculture of drill music?
So ever since I arrived at YouTube, the phenomena of drill music was something that I just couldn't ignore. The data of the amount of views of how much drill videos were being consumed on one hand was staggering. And then on the other hand, I turned up at work one day and was confronted with the sight of a group of mothers who had lost sons to gang violence. They're protesting outside the office, smearing blood on the reception windows and stuff. And it was such a sort of hotbed issue where the mainstream media was looking at YouTube as a purveyor of these videos that could be identified as inciting violence. There was a group of young people who were using this as their form of creative expression. And, for us, when we can dive head into an issue that feels really relevant to YouTube, that's what we look for in terms of a commission. So we saw this, and we saw an opportunity to tell the stories of the young people who choose this music as their form of expression, as their form of a way out. And we found like a creative way to do it that we felt was really exciting. So that was kind of the inspiration of this film, Terms and Conditions.
Well, let's bring on director Brian Hill and narrator Andre Montgomery Johnson. So let's say hello. There's Andre. Hi. Lovely to have you with us.
Hi. Lovely to be here.
Hey, great to see you both. Brian, let's start with you. Having watched the film, which kind of features predominantly young Black men, did you have any qualms about taking on a subject from which you were so far removed? I'm assuming drill music wasn't necessarily your bag.
Uh, I must admit, the first time I met Luke to talk about it, and he kind of mentioned drill, I kind of searched my memory for a while to think what it was. I had a vague idea, but luckily I asked my sons and they knew. No, I was reluctant at first because, as you say, I'm a long way from being the kind of person who would be listening to it or involved in it. But then I thought, this is on my doorstep in London, and it's really interesting. It's a social phenomenon that needs to be explored. It's a serious issue. Is music causing violence? Is this kind of particular genre of music making bad things happen? And I didn't think it was, but I thought it was worth exploring and trying to get to grips with that and find out why people thought that music again was being blamed for society's ills. So it was really interesting for me to kind of delve into that world. And actually, one of the things that made me a little reluctant at first was I thought it would be so hard to penetrate that world and so hard to get people to talk to me and open up, but it actually wasn't at all. And that's partly or largely to do with Andre, who's got an in and knows everybody and kind of made the introductions and vouched for me and said he's okay, you can talk to him, and off we went.
And I think this is, Rhianna, this is one of the key things to recognize here, is that Brian and Andre bring two unique approaches that made this documentary possible. Andre's channel, the Mr. Montgomery channel, is basically the voice of drill on YouTube. Like any sort of thing that's going on in the drill scene, you go to that channel. Andre has documented it, has had an opinion that some that get people like or don't like, but he's there as a sort of people's journalist almost on it. So to be able to take his kind of voice and mesh it with Brian, who has a history of doing some amazing musical documentaries about young people on the edge of society, was just, that was the thing where you couldn't have done this with one or the other of them, but you couldn't have done it without them as a pair.
So Andre, you are our guide through drill in the doc. How did you get involved? How did you feel about this documentary being made? And how did you bridge that gap between Brian and some of the people that we see in the doc?
From the beginning, drill, similar to what Brian said, is on his doorstep. But of course, my experience with drill is more than just music. It's lifestyle, it's culture, it's where I'm from. And most of the young men that do drill songs at the time when it was kicking off, most of them I knew, or I had some form of relation in just some of the stuff that they rap about, you know what I mean? And of course, I got the contact from Century Films. And of course, Brian detailed to me exactly what he was trying to do, because what I was doing was so, if I could say, fragile. It's such a fragile genre, and also just a fragile topic at the time, especially with the police battling against the world of drill. I didn't know what to expect when getting the offer from Brian, but sitting down with him and speaking to him, and him detailing exactly who he wanted to see in this documentary, and the people he wanted to consume this documentary, not just people like me or just your average young person that listens to music, but somebody that lives in Cheshire, someone that lives outside of London, in an environment that may not understand what's actually going on, but will be able to find some form of compassion and just human understanding into what goes on in drill. So I started covering drill just based off of the relativity, and it was something that was emerging around me. And I just thought to myself, there wouldn't be anybody better to have a voice on this than myself, somebody that has experience similar to what they're going through. So it was an amazing experience being in this documentary. I'd say probably life-changing in the aspect of just everything, making films and just dealing with people's trauma. Because when you make a documentary like this, you're capturing stories. You take it, you may capture them on a camera and it stays on the camera, but it's not just only on the camera where you capture it in your mind, you capture the emotion when you sit down with a parent, when you sit down with somebody that's telling you their life, you take that with you. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's been an amazing experience doing the doc.
So how did making it did it make you reflect on new things or find new things to love in drill? Did it give you different perspectives that maybe has changed the way you think about it?
Yeah, definitely. It did give me different perspectives. Of course, I am an honest advocate for what I see. If I don't like something, I will say it. Of course, I always say this, there's two sides to drill. There is the side that is questionable and the side that gets a lot of people in trouble. And there is a human side of it that portrays these young kids in a human way. You know, when you're there with them at a video shoot or in the studio, they take it really serious. You know what I mean? This is their bread and butter. You know, they actually want to make money off of this legally. And seeing, you know, just how much times they might redo a song or redo a shoot, that effort that they put into doing that just shows how important it is to them. And when you put 100% into something, whether it's music or anything, you can thrive in it. And yeah, that was more or less the perspective I got from it, just how serious a lot of these drill rappers actually take music and the way they see it as a way out. So yeah.
Brian, it's such a balanced documentary. We hear from people who are making the music. We hear from mothers who blame drill for their children's deaths. What were some of the biggest surprises that were thrown up during the making of this, do you think, that perhaps audience wouldn't necessarily expect?
I think I was most surprised by and humbled by meeting some of the mothers who had suffered this appalling tragedy. You know, they'd lost their sons to a violent attack, and they were so measured in their response and so willing to see another opinion. They didn't just say, "Oh, drill's killed my children," or these. You know, they absolutely wanted to understand, and they absolutely didn't hold bitterness in their hearts or anger. I thought it was really moving and quite a privilege to spend time with them. And then of course I kind of had this idea that they should have a song. They should have a choir, a mother's choir, and to sing a song about what they'd experienced. And that was a really moving day when we filmed that.
That was a really
I think the other thing as well that surprised me, well, not surprised me, but really pleased me was, as Andrea alluded to, just how really dedicated some of these people are to their music. You know, it's easy to think, oh, they're just kids on an estate, just kind of singing about any old stuff. But actually, no, they put a lot of effort into it. They put a lot of thought into it. They get around things like lack of money using guerrilla tactics, you know, for the filmmaking and stuff, which was really eye-opening for me. But they are, you know, a lot of them are really serious about what they do.
Luke, can you tell me a bit about the impact of the doc when it came out almost, what was it, a year ago now?
Yeah, in terms of the impact of the doc, we released it on GRM Daily. So, you know, in a place that we felt was credible and where it would reach the first audience that we wanted it to reach, which is young people who could really do with hearing, looking at the bigger picture and hearing an anti-violence message wrapped up within the music that they love, wrapped up within the sort of street stories that they're accustomed to. So we had, you know, the best thing about YouTube is the comment section. You know, that's there's no way around it. Like inside the comment section, you get people expressing themselves so freely just about what they feel. And I think, you know, this has been one of my favorite experiences ever in terms of people just being honest, and the sort of dialogue and discussion that has occurred that has actually been quite mature and has really shown the kind of you know, how astute and caring the audience can be. You know, YouTube comment section often get a real bad rap, but within that one, there's a lot of really, you know, things that really I've found quite moving, and I've learned a lot out of it. So yeah, so watch the movie, everybody, then enjoy the credits. But we had a great response from the audience, and then also in terms of beyond that, you know, we had some really great articles about the piece. And, you know, I've actually heard from a lot of, you know, older people who caught the film, you know, and were able to evaluate drill in a different way. And I think probably the biggest memory that I'll take away from this of a singular moment, apart from getting to meet and work with these two, was when we did a screening, you know, just over a year ago at the YouTube space. And, you know, some of the mothers who had, you know, spoken in the film about how much they hated this type of music were actually stood talking to some of the rappers who'd been in the film. You know, there was a real exchange of stories and perspectives. And, you know, a few of the mothers commented to me and Brian and Andre afterwards that, you know, they really did look at drill in a completely different way after watching the film. And I think, you know, those ladies who'd been so incredibly aggrieved by what they perceived with this music, getting to talk to these artists and having that kind of response after watching the film, that's something I'll never forget.
How incredible to have seen that, actually. Brian, stylistically, this is just such an interesting looking documentary. It's cut together almost like a music video, and then you have these beautiful black and white interviews. Why did you choose to film it that way, and how easy was it to get all of that done? And
I don't think we've got time for me to go through every decision we made, but I mean, one of the great things about doing this film with YouTube was having a lot of creative freedom, which I wouldn't necessarily have had had I been making it for certain other people. But you know, the idea that we'd shoot interviews, you know, with the subjects close to the camera, black and white, interesting lighting in the background. You know, I wouldn't have been able to do that in lots of places in Britain.
How come?
You know,
why?
Because they just think black and white would freak our audience out. You know, people aren't ready for this. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's just mad. But you know, YouTube were completely on board with all of that. They're completely on board with, you know, a lot of the creative decisions we made. And
I must say, Brian, the only time that I did actually interfere was to say that there was one artist that Brian and Andre were really passionate about using in the film, who's now gone on to become absolutely huge. And it was my stupid decision to say that she shouldn't be in the piece. I feel like such a fool for that.
Well, I suspect it's nice of you to fall on the sword, but I suspect that we all had our doubts at some point anyway. But anyway, and no, it was just, you know, we commissioned 5 music pieces. We commissioned different artists to do, you know, because one of the things about drill was this idea that they just write about and they make songs about kind of girls, drugs, guns, bling, etc., etc. And so one of the jobs that we had, and one of the things we wanted to do in the film, was to say to people, can you write about something else? Can you do a song about something else other than all this? And, you know, we talked about this with Luke and the team at YouTube, and everybody was in agreement we should try this out and see what happened. And of course we had this amazing response. So Drill Minister said, I want to make a song about income inequality. And Skangdon AM said, yeah, we want to do a song about how young black men are perceived by society. So that was a great thing to do. And then to get to make those songs with Fraser T. Smith was a great experience. So yeah, lots of freedom and lots of support as well from the guys at YouTube.
And for those who don't know, Fraser T. Smith is the producer who did not only Stormzy, Gang Signs and Prayers, but also Dave's Psychodrama.
I mean, that moment, just like seeing how excited everyone was to work with him in the documentary was just a really kind of lovely thing. When Vanessa and Abigail come on, and then we hear from La Vida Loca, we hear the female perspective and it shifts a little bit. Andre, I wanted to ask you, it sounds like women are struggling to break through and be respected in drill music just from those interviews. Do you think that shifted at all in the last year since that doc came out?
Yeah, definitely. It was one of the things that Brian brought up just in his analysis of drill, just how sometimes some artists can degrade women and can itemize them in their songs. I definitely think in the last year, the palette has opened for female artists to take over. Of course, Ivorian going, you know, doing crazy stuff, but music has always been a male-dominated genre, and we wanted to look at those things. We wanted to look at the specifics within music, and it provides a greater question, not just within drill, but just in society as much. You know, is there a lack of equality gender-wise in so many things? So of course we wanted to just show those points, you know, the things that people may miss. Because if you're just a normal drill listener, you're 15 years old, you're not really going to pay attention to some of the degrading stuff, or maybe even the lack of opportunities for women in this genre. But, you know, with this documentary, it's detailed it, and it's helped people to analyze and understand, you know, doors need to be open for everybody within every demographic, you know, like women in drill is just one aspect. There's other aspects of drill. There's political drill, you know what I mean? Last year, believe it or not, there was even gay drill. So there's like different elements of this genre opening up. And we wanted to just show that in this documentary. So, yeah.
And Luke, you mentioned this at the top, but there are moments in the film that are critical of YouTube, which show those protests you were talking about outside YouTube headquarters. Editorially, how does that work? Did you or Brian have to really push to include that, or were you like, no, we have to include this?
I mean, but for us, doing this film was an experience in you know, for me, just in as the commissioner, there were many moments where I had sleepless nights because I felt like this film would never see the light of day, because it was saying so many things that were true. And often when you do that, you know, there's a perception that people want to hide that information. But, you know, I have to credit the people I work with, the guys at YouTube and Google Policy, the head of YouTube for the UK, Ben McCone-Wilson, everybody, all of them involved they stood behind me and they pushed for us to make an honest appraisal, because they knew that if we did a thing that was not critical of YouTube's role in the piece, we would just lose the whole game. Everything, you know, you'd have all the sort of, you know, great, you know, the mothers singing, all the great tracks, all the great stories, you know, people like La Vida Loca. But if you just came to YouTube and just, then the film would fall down as a piece. And so I think that, you know, not just in this film, but elsewhere, we've been honest and open about our role in this situation. And I've got to tell you as well, like, you know, one of the things I was most impressed with when I came to work at YouTube was how there were so many incredibly intelligent people working so hard to not just make sure that violent lyrics weren't on the platform, but to make sure that the key artists who were doing great things also stayed on the platform, felt like YouTube was a place to be, and didn't feel discriminated against because it was drill. There was never a thing of like, oh, let's just ban all drill. It was like, these are human beings with different opinions and different perspectives. And so we just have to listen to what's actually being said here and make sure that we don't have a sort of reactionary response. So yeah, so it was a nail-biting experience, but I was, as I say, just very lucky to get the support of the team here at YouTube to be able to deliver the film that we did.
Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap it up there because we need to get on to the next section, but we are going to come back to you at the end. We've got some questions coming through already. Please keep asking them in using the Q&A function. So we'll say goodbye to Brian and Andre for the moment. Thank you so much. Bye.
Farewell.
We'll
smell you later.
We'll come back to you in a bit. But now I'd like to bring on Kevin Batchelor and Ethan Payne to talk about how to be Behzinga. Hello,
and now for something completely different.
I know, it does feel like that. Hi, guys.
This is the feel-good story of the year, guys. This is
well, yeah, this is a really gorgeous story. Kevin, let's start with you. This film touches on so many different subjects: cancer, mental health, fitness, masculinity, friendship. What did you know that you were making a film about? You know, what did you set out to make a film about? And then what came out organically?
Oh, that's a great question to start with. If I'm being honest, you know, we set out to make a film about Ethan, you know, and all of these subjects and topics were part of his life and part of who has shaped the man that he is now and where he's got to. So even though, you know, when we spoke to Luke and the guys originally about it all, we had an idea of what we wanted to make. It really came down to knowing what Ethan wanted to make as well, you know, because this was going to sit on his platform, on his channel, and speak to his audience. So we wanted to do something that felt like it came from his tone of voice, but maybe from a point of view that he wouldn't look at it himself. And that's really where it all came from. So he was incredibly open. Like Ethan will tell you in a minute, like, I've never worked with anybody on camera who's been as willing to put themselves out there as Ethan was on this documentary. Like, it almost was like there was nowhere we couldn't go or nowhere we couldn't explore. And I think for a filmmaker, that's brilliant, but also terrifying, because like you've mentioned, where do you go? Where do you stop? Where do you know when to pull back or when to go deeper? And it was something that evolved without doubt over the course of the filmmaking. Like, originally, you know, this was a documentary about Ethan running the London Marathon and about how his journey had changed. You know, and how his life had changed, and he transformed himself to be a person that could run the London Marathon, essentially. And as we dug into it and got deeper, you know, there was moments and things that he'd experienced in his life and reasons that he was running the marathon that had to be told in the documentary. And Ethan put himself out there and allowed us to tell it in what I like to think like a unbelievably compelling and honest way.
Ethan, your fans are used to you producing a certain type of content with the Sidemen on your own. How did you feel about showing them a different, really vulnerable side?
I think it's good from my point of view, because I'd sort of shared my journey sort of transparently throughout my videos already, but never really deeply touching on what got me being where I am today, just merely covering sort of like the aspects that I did to change my life for the better. So being able to produce a bit of content that comes from a personal point of view, where it is a story being told that the viewers just definitely would never have seen before if it wasn't on a platform or how it was delivered. I don't think it never been accessible. I would never have been able to put together that piece of content or that story and told it the way it was told eventually.
Luke, we have this story which is so extraordinary, and yet, you know, there is something just very, very relatable, and, you know, people are going to completely kind of feel what Ethan has felt throughout this whole series. What was it about Behzinga's story that makes this so compelling? Why did you commission it in the first place?
So I'd worked with Ethan before, and we'd done a show called The Sidemen Show, and I've got to like meet him and see him in the show, and you know, it's so weird, but understand that he was one of those human beings that you're compelled to put your arms around, if that makes any kind of sense. Not that we've ever done that, obviously, Ethan, but you know, I just saw that it was someone with real heart there who had such a genuine relationship with his audience, and I was one of his audience, and I felt like probably the greatest thing I'd seen on YouTube for years was to see the transformation Ethan went through when he was going to train for a boxing match that never happened, and then just to see the metamorphosis in his kind of attitude, and more so like how he was inspiring other people, including myself, to get healthy. Like, I was just like sat here like, this is the greatest story we have. Like, it has everything. And so we started off like scrambling, let's do something about, I just wanted to reach out. So I reached out to his management, and they got back. I said, what's next for Ethan? They got back into the marathon. I was like, amazing. Let's try and do something here. And you know, and what really was brilliant was how open Ethan was to just go wider than that and really just tell the full story, because, you know, so many creators, you know, use their cameras, they relate to their audience all the time, but they never go deeper than a certain level. And this show allowed Ethan to really communicate a different kind of level. And then the group of us, it was just one of those crazy things, like, right, that's it, we'll make a documentary about the marathon, off we go. Coronavirus, boom. So it's just like what was going to be a one-off with a bit of a live special at the marathon, all of a sudden it became more complex. And not to talk about Ethan like he's not here, but we started to see footage and understand that in lockdown, beyond the first thing of Ethan getting healthy, he was going on a sort of introspective journey of awakening in being cooped up in a house, and just to be going on that journey that has such a highs and lows and the sort of evolution, beginning, middle, and end, just felt like something very, very unique that we get, very true to YouTube, which is always something we look for when we commission a show.
It is just such an incredibly ambitious piece as well. So, Kevin, where did some of the more out there ideas come from? And more importantly, how did you get Luke to agree to them? Like Eddie Hall firing a bazooka at a plane while riding a tank. What?
Yeah, the early on decision is that we wanted to also make content that did hit hard and get those sort of like real moving moments, but we wanted to give balance to it. And also, like Ethan's audience, they're used to content which is fun and it's upbeat and there's excitement to it. And we wanted to create that flavor throughout each episode. So there was always like real low moments, there's real high moments, and you wanted to ride that emotional journey with Ethan. But at the same time, we also wanted to look at stereotypes that you might not think would be affected by certain subjects that were involved in that documentary. Like Eddie Hall, world's strongest man. Could someone be more masculine than him? Like, probably not. But we can then break down barriers and show that he's also been through similar situations. And I mean, I can't tell you, we did one day where we were just hooking up with Eddie just to touch base during lockdown with Ethan. And it's in the documentary. And it's when Eddie talks about, that, he couldn't see his nan, and then they found her and she'd died in her garden. And it was like, I was literally in this room here watching this on a Zoom, and you just sat there thinking, we're making something which is of a moment where people have got a shared experience, where it's through, mental health, or it's through loss, or it's through grief, or all these different things. And we were making a documentary that was evolving with that. And it just felt like I know it sounds a crazy thing to say, but there could have been no better time to have made this documentary about Ethan to resonate with his audience and the greater public, because there was a shared experience that we all went through, and that became a massive part of the story, but also became a great vehicle to be able to touch on things that people might not have wanted to go down before, or might not have been open to before. And we got lucky in that respect, but we also were brave enough, I think, to include those moments. But you also had to put things in like Ethan walking on hot coals, because it was symbolic, but also it's, he's part of what he does. Ethan will probably talk about it in a minute, but that was one of my greatest days ever filming. Like I'm sort of getting a bit emotional thinking about it now. Like, I can't tell you, when he walked over those coals, like the emotion, it was like coming to the end of a journey, and that was what we intended. That was the whole point. It was the final 10 yards of your marathon is going to be hard and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much that worked for this, and a lot of that was down to Ethan, like being open and giving us the opportunities, but also because of the platform we were doing it on. A bit like Brian said earlier, like, we could have tried to make this in a traditional way, and we wouldn't have been able to reach the ambition, have the scope and have the scale to go small then big, and to flex our muscles in different ways. And that makes a much more interesting sort of documentary and journey for people to go on. And that's kind of benefit to both the platform that we had, which was YouTube, and Ethan and his audience, which allowed for that as well.
I mean, Ethan, you are really put through your paces, which does make for great watching. Like, not just like the walking on fire, but pulling a fire truck. Were you in on all of these ideas? How game were you? Did you say no to anything, or were you just like, they've asked me, so I have to say yes?
So that's the fun thing. Working with Kev was amazing, and the whole team, because I sort of just let it all go. I was like, whatever you put in place, let's do it. For example, the coal shoot, Kev just said, "Oh, we're filming at the London Stadium," and that was it. That's all I was told. It was we're filming at the London Stadium. We've got a challenge set up for you. And when you're going into it, builds excitement within yourself as well, because you don't know what you're gonna face on the day. But I remember saying when we'd organised to pull the fire truck, I was like, "Well, good luck, lads, because I don't know if this is going to happen." So a lot of the times, rocking up to the shoots throughout the training, whatever it was always like, "Can I do this?" And I think that obviously translates in the documentary as well, because a lot of the stuff that I'm through over the last two years, and even putting myself into the marathon, and especially the style that we did the marathon in. I feel like that is just the message. Like, can you do it? Can you look within yourself and do these things? So I think you've got the fun aspect of these challenges that look good visually. They're fun for the audience, but they also have that deeper underlying tone where it's saying, can you put yourself in this situation and come out the other end?
You've also got these really lovely interviews from your mum, which was just so gorgeous and sweet, and just hearing her be so proud of you was just incredibly moving. But then also from your friends, from the sidemen as well. Those sorts of conversations might not be ones that you necessarily have day to day. So what sort of impact was it hearing them sort of speak about you like you weren't there? But, you know, how did that support kind of help you through this whole journey?
Oh, it made me very emotional because, like you said, I think it's very taboo. It's very taboo with men not speaking to each other about their feelings or the situations they're in. So seeing them talk and have these conversations was really emotional for me. Like when Kev played back like quotes that Josh had said or something like that, it just really made me emotional as well. So seeing those conversations and hearing what they had to say, yeah, definitely sort of. It just enhances sort of like how much you're going to pour into things, and you realize, because you don't have these conversations on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that we wanted to do early on, was we wanted every interview to be direct to camera, you know, to sort of like create like a visual voice across the series. So because YouTube's a platform where creators talk to their audience directly, so we wanted to have that, but I also wanted it to be as if everybody away from Ethan was talking to Ethan. So when Ethan watched the footage back, it felt like there was a personal connection with it. So when he did see his mum talking, she wasn't looking off camera to somebody that isn't there, like we don't know who it is. She was talking to Ethan. And when we saw, you know, the sidemen talking, or his school teacher talking, or his friends talking, they were talking to Ethan. And that was really important for me to make that connection, that the audience were in the point of view of Ethan, and that Ethan was also in the point of view of the audience, like through that visual sort of side of things.
The pacing of this as well was just so like frenetic, and the camera just never felt static. It was always moving. So tell us about that and why you wanted to make sure that you kept that energy up.
I mean, I wanted it to feel like the roller coaster of life, if I'm being honest, and what Ethan had gone through. So, you know, when we were cutting things fast and it was high energy, that's how we felt Ethan would be feeling at that time. And when we slowed it down, it felt reflective. And like that was the hope that would come across, that it would feel like at times it was just like everything was going really quick, and it seemed like, you know, running's a symbolic thing, right? Are you running towards your goal, or are you running away from your fears? And like we wanted to create that sort of energy throughout the whole thing, because we're building up to a marathon. So then if you could dip it and slow it down, that's kind of what we thought that Ethan might have been going through, those moments. And there are moments where we just completely slow the whole thing down and it feels really poignant. And there's moments where the energy just turns up. And I think you need to do that when you're looking at 20-25 minutes of episodes, to keep that pace going, but also to engage. I think that's the most important thing.
And tell me about filming the marathon itself, you know, through the marshlands, because we see, you know, I think Ethan has a camera on his wrist at one point, but then I feel like there was a buggy involved. You've got things flying around. Like, tell me about that sort of whole setup, because it just seemed, again, ambitious is the word.
I was crazy. I mean, it was crazy is the best way to describe it. I mean, like originally, obviously, we were going to shoot this at the London Marathon.
Yeah.
And the idea was originally is that we were going to shoot at the marathon, edit it that night, get it up the next day, and it was going to be really reactive. And, you know, we were going to be on the streets of London. We were going to be shooting 3 people. We were going to be using fans, you know, their cameras cheering Ethan on. So it felt almost really ambitious, but a lot more achievable. Obviously, when we know that COVID's hit, and obviously Ethan's a known face, I didn't want to do it anywhere public, you know, that might cause, you know, people to come on the streets or support him, because, you know, we're going through the middle of a pandemic. So we thought that actually symbolically and health and safety and responsibly wise, it was best to do it somewhere remote. And so we chose Suffolk because it looked really cool. We thought it had marshlands, and also it evolved, you know, like the story of Ethan had evolved. It wasn't just a straight road race anymore. His life was a challenge. It had muddy, boggy times in his life. He had bits where he had to run uphill. There was bits where he had to go through like dark areas. And maybe this comes across or not, but that was also the idea of the route. It felt like we're going back on the journey of the documentary a little bit. But to film it was great. You know, we had like cameras set up everywhere. We didn't have loads. You know, it was like a, you know, 26.2 miles, and we had, I think, maybe 20 cameras, but we planned to position the camera so each camera could cover 2.5 miles on very long lenses. So the one camera could like get a shot from over here, which covered X, Y, and Z, so we could cut them across and intercut them all. We then had drones that obviously could fly 1 kilometer at a time around the circumference. And we had a go kind of like a buggy with a Steadicam on the back, which was on all of the roads. And then in between that, like ironically, I was in a van driving around with a camera shooting myself, and I had a monitor that I could see Ethan at every point. So everywhere Ethan was, because we're in a world of Zoom now, everybody was sending me their camera. So I knew where it was. So I was trying to get these slightly more emotive shots or shout like encouragement, like keep running, you're doing it, and all that kind of stuff. So it was really good fun to do, but it was really about the camera that Ethan had. You know, that's the narrative, that's the story, that's what I think his audience are used to seeing, is that personality. Like there's one bit where like an owl flies past and he's like, oh, yeah, an owl, and like they're all the moments that we want, you know, because that's like the unexpected. That's just Ethan being Ethan, and that's what we loved. And I think the rest of it looking pretty, that's nice, but without Ethan's POV, it would mean nothing.
I mean, you don't get much more authentic than having to go to the toilet twice.
Oh God!
Twice in a series.
I was wondering if this was going to come up, but okay. When duty calls, duty calls, okay. And if anyone out there is thinking of running a marathon, don't have a Wagamama's the night before. Just don't. Save yourself the trouble.
That was honestly a real highlight.
Obviously, because on Ethan's camera, you know, Ethan's talking to the camera, but we can't see that. So obviously, there's a few moments where we lose Ethan, and we lost Ethan, like when he went to the toilet. So we're literally, because he wasn't on camera, so it was like, we're kind of like, he should be coming around the corner in a minute, and everyone's like, he's not coming. Where is it? We're like, oh, what? Maybe he's fallen. Like, send a drone up. Like thank goodness we never saw anything, but we found him in the end, and he got back on track, so it was all right.
Oh, that's amazing. I just wanted to ask Ethan before we go to audience Q&A, how does having that immediate feedback and, you know, like Luke mentioned earlier, having those comments in real time affect, you know, your work, your journey, etc.?
So the one thing that is fantastic about YouTube and having a live premiere is we had a premiere for each episode day after day. Oh, cool. And obviously I'm still going about my work with the sidemen and all the boys. I was on the way to another shoot when the episode was airing. So I'm in the car getting ready to watch my own premiere, and you're seeing all the feedback roll in. Like you'll see the very first moment where I get in front of the truck and stuff like this. People are like, oh my God, can he do it? And it's this real-time interaction that makes people feel like you're watching it with them, like you're watching it in the cinema together. So that aspect of it is absolutely amazing. And then also just the feedback on Twitter, on all these different platforms after the episode's out, and the excitement going into the next episode is just fantastic to see that such like quick reaction. It's inspiring as well, because it makes you want to do more.
Yeah. Oh God. So, I mean, such an incredible achievement.
It's a really odd thing to watch, like happen as well, like to see it premiere live because if you make stuff normally, all the only feedback you get is critics' feedback. So, you know, and that's just from a point of view. Well, this you're immediately getting like the audience that we're trying to talk to, like their reactions and their feedback. And I think the one thing that I've learned and that I really respect about YouTube, like Originals, is there's an honesty about all the content they make. Because I feel like if you can't be honest to do it on YouTube, you're gonna get shouted out on it. Like if you set stuff up or cheat stuff and it's not a real story. Like this audience are intelligent. Ethan's audience, they're intelligent. They know him. They know what he makes. And for me, that taught me a lot as a filmmaker about authenticity in terms of the content you're making and the story you're trying to tell through documentaries. And this is like the best platform for that. And you know, that was one of the most rewarding things, I think.
While we get, maybe Brian and Andre could come back on, and just while they are, Luke, can I just ask you about the structure of, we have a film, we have a series. So can you tell us about those decisions, about why you chose to sort of divide them up like that?
Well, we just got to, in every case, we just look at what is best for the story we're trying to tell and what is best for the audience. You know, there were long labored, days looking at the data of Ethan's channel, trying to understand what would be the best way to release those, listening to Ethan himself about, you know, how he wanted to release it, taking that into account. And then, for us, the great joy here is that we aren't in a world where we have to do 6 times 22 of something. If something works for 3 episodes, then that's what it is. It's 3 episodes. And I think for terms and conditions, we wanted to do something that felt like a big statement piece on the issues, one sort of experience that's like a testament that will stand the sort of test of time, that people could enjoy, like one statement piece. And then we had the 5 music videos as well that we could then put out there. People could enjoy the videos and then be linked back to the film. So when producers are coming to us, we really want them to think about what the best form is, take data into consideration, but really that there are no sort of restrictions or limits. That's one of the great things about commissioning at YouTube.
Brilliant, thank you. We have our first audience question for you, Luke, actually. Is there space for wildlife films on YouTube Originals?
Yes, definitely. If there's a way that it can be connected to something relevant to YouTube, if there's a creator out there who's already doing some great stuff with wildlife, or who has a passion for wildlife that you could partner with to allow them to sort of follow that dream or ambition, that could be possible. If there's a wildlife channel out there already that is doing well, potentially doing something with them could be good. So yeah, we're definitely open to it, but I think for the most part, the stuff that we do is all very sort of personality led. Even the learning and impact and kids stuff, it's still really one person with that direct connection telling their story, or a group of people telling a story. So wildlife, yes, but it would definitely still have to have a human element to it, because I think that's important on YouTube.
This is a question for Brian and Kevin. What skills are most important to have in directing documentaries / factual productions? Brian, start with you. Oh, Brian, you're on mute. It's been a while since I've said that.
There you go. Sorry. I think probably you need a range of skills, and I think one is that you need to, if you're doing documentaries, you need to always be very flexible, because things go wrong. People don't turn up, the weather goes bad, something else will go wrong. So you need to be able to think on your feet and do something different, or go on a new tack. And so that's one thing. I think the other thing is that you need to have a vision. You need to have an idea of what you want to do. You need to have a kind of sense of the film you want to make. Even, I mean, one of the great joys of documentaries is that they often don't turn out exactly as you planned them. And that's also one of the heartaches of them as well, because, that can cause issues. But I think you need to have a clear vision to start with, even if the film doesn't always end up like that. And I think you need to have a really, really strong interest in people and their stories and what they've got to say to the world.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, I kind of echo a lot of that, really. I mean, I think I always write down, like, I sort of take it back a little bit, sort of like to when I was sort of studying. I literally write down my entire idea of what the content, or what the show, what the documentary will look like from beginning to end. Like Brian said, it never really ends up like that, but at least I go into it knowing what my purpose is. But for me, the biggest thing will be trust as well. Like, I need to have a team around me that I trust, whether that's my camera operators, my sound guys, and I need to have contributors that trust me, that trust that, I'm not going to do what I go against what I've said to them that I'm going to say, especially say working with like Ethan on this, like, we're telling someone's intimate personal story. So it's about almost creating and becoming friends with each other, learning about each other and knowing where and how far you can push those boundaries of storytelling through the trust that you've sort of got between each other. That, and you need a bit of luck. That's honestly,
Definitely need some luck.
Yeah.
Question for Luke. What is the process for pitching proposals? Very plosive question.
Please reach out to us at the following email address, ytosubmissions@google.com. If you can put across as sort of like as much detail about the idea and any talent attachments, that would be really good. We don't really like things that feel like you've already pitched them to Netflix or BBC Three or somewhere else. Stuff that could fit anywhere isn't really for us. We want some sort of USP that connects it to YouTube, that makes it feel like it could only ever exist on YouTube. And the sort of one of the things that really helps get things off to a good start is to say, this is the YouTube channel that I'd like to partner with to do it. If you've already spoken to them, or if there's a specific creator, for us, it just makes so much sense to partner with and celebrate people who've already put in loads of time to YouTube. It's just the right thing to do for us and our business. So that we really want people to, and we work with producers all the time who don't have YouTube channels, but producers who have taken a moment to get their heads into the platform and identify channels that they feel like they could partner with. That's the way that we're able to move things forward. So yeah, those are the key things to think about.
Brilliant. And this is for Ethan and Andre. What do you look for in a production company to want to collaborate with them on an idea, and what would put you off? Andre, let's start with you.
Definitely previous work. Relating to Brian done a film called Feltham Sings, and watching that film, it's about 15 years old, but it's relevant to today. I could play that film 10 years from now, message will still be the same, relevancy till this day. And also just personal experience of the company or the director, where they come from, but also, are they trying to learn more? Do they challenge what they know already? Like, what's the type of questions they ask? The stuff that Brian asks me, his mannerism, and just, he was quick with getting certain things. He just understood that, he just put two and two together quickly. I didn't really have to explain certain social aspects, especially when it comes to drill artists. A lot of them are unreliable. And a lot of them are quite dangerous, you know what I mean? Some of them have mental health issues, and they behave in certain ways that they don't really see is wrong, or they haven't ever been corrected about certain behaviors. And Brian was able to pick that stuff up quickly. His approach towards people was very, very, very good. So yeah, that's more or less the stuff that I look for.
Thank you. And Ethan?
I echo some of the things that Andre said, but also what Kev said in the last thing, when he was talking about building that relationship with people that are involved in the story. I think one thing that was great about working with Kevin and the whole team was every time if we're filming here, if we're just speaking, if we're doing a bigger scale shoot, it always felt like it was just a family environment. It was so relaxed. It's one of them ones that I could go into and I can laugh and joke, but get the job done in time. And it's building that relationship and trust throughout the entire process. We ended up filming for 8 months when it was meant to be about a 4-month thing. So I ended up spending nearly a year with Kev and the team, which when you look at it, you might think, oh, wow, that's a bit of a drag, but it actually wasn't. It was really enjoyable. We'd ended up building such a relationship where if we was filming a certain piece and Kevin was pointing the questions, all the crew were bang on. And I think it is just building that relationship throughout a project. And I think that's one of the most important things for me.
And question for Kevin, when you were making the documentary for the style of filming, it had elements of YouTube content creation such as vlogging, and was that a conscious decision because it was broadcast on YouTube?
It was, yeah. I mean, I think we wanted to tell Ethan's story and Ethan's narrative, and that's all part of Ethan's story and journey. And I think especially when we went into lockdown, I think it felt like the most appropriate time to go back to a style of filmmaking or a style of content creating that Ethan's known for, and he does it really well. The beauty of it was that, we tried to shoot things really lovely to make it look nice and, like Luke says, to elevate it. But Ethan does that as well himself. Like, the content he makes looks really great. He talks a similar language to us about depth of field and quality of image. And so we had that ability to be able to not make it look like it jumped out and to blend it into what we were shooting. So it worked really well. And I think it's an honest voice when it feels like it's coming from Ethan, rather than me doing it over Zoom or us coming in during lockdown to try and do something like COVID safe. And that was the main reason.
Yeah. This is a question for Luke. Are YouTube Originals also interested in animated content, either one-offs or short series?
We're open to it. We are currently commissioning for YouTube Kids. So if there's stuff that feels like it's younger skewing, we'd love to take a look at any pitches. You know, animated stuff. I mean, what we try to do is stay, you know, sort of 1 degree of separation away from the stuff that's already working really well on YouTube. Loads of great animation on YouTube. So if there's a way to tie it in, then perhaps. But we're not really doing for grown-ups narrative scripted stuff at the moment. So if it was an animation explainer or something, maybe, but not really buying narrative scripted things at the moment.
Okay. Also, somebody has asked if you could put that email address, if you could say it again, maybe you could just pop it in the chat.
Yeah, I think that was me.
Yeah, no problem.
Did I ask?
Yeah, Kevin was frantically looking for a pen there. What other questions have we got? How, Brian and Kevin, how much experience or knowledge did you have to have of YouTube before you began working on a YouTube original? Brian?
I knew that YouTube existed. I'd seen
Great
it.
start.
I didn't actually, when I first had a call from Luke, I wasn't aware that they were commissioning kind of feature-length documentaries, so I didn't know that. So it was great to find that out, and great to know that there's another platform to kind of go and talk to about the work you want to do, and also what's good is a platform where you can do things a little differently than you would for other people. So you know, which I talked about earlier about you know, having a different creative kind of mindset dealing with them. So yeah, I mean, like everything, you know, watch stuff. If you want to pitch to YouTube, then you should watch stuff on YouTube. If you want to pitch the BBC, you should watch stuff on the BBC.
Yeah. Kevin?
I mean, I know mine's slightly different. Maybe, you know, YouTube came about when I was still studying like film and stuff. So it very much became part of my like culture. You know, where we'd put work out to show people, to share it. I ended up starting the company up that we run now because we won a competition that ran through YouTube, not through YouTube Originals or anything, but a competition that's where you had to put the stuff. So for me, it's always been somewhere I've gone to consume content, share content. So I had an understanding of it before we made the How To Be Behzinga. We were lucky enough to have made something else with Luke and the team. We'd made a documentary about Lewis Capaldi called Birthday Song. That we're pitching. So we had an understanding of the process and how it worked. And that was, for us, was really good because we could see the strengths and weaknesses in some of those things that worked for that documentary and try to almost like perfect it when it came to Ethan's story.
We've got another question for Ethan and Andre, although I can't see Andre. I don't know if he's just... Oh, there you are. Okay, great. They've asked, you've both shared a lot of very personal experiences in the documentary. When did you decide that you did want to share your story, and why? And did you need much convincing? Ethan?
It's something I touched on in my personal videos, whether it just be my talking videos, sitting down, talking to the audience, or even just fun videos. I touched on some aspects of when I was going through a tough time. I've spoke about it on some of my friends' podcasts as well, but never really delved into it. So I'd opened the book. The book was there. It was opened, and it was just about developing those chapters and really telling it in a good way. And one thing I explained to my friends once it was out is it almost feels like you are just naked in the world. As funny as it sounds, that's what it feels like. It feels like whoever you meet on the street will know a lot about you if they've seen the documentary. And for me, it's sort of a lot of weight off of my shoulders as well, because I feel like talking is a great way of getting things off your way. But also it connects with young impressionable people as well. So people that might be going through sort of a difficult stage, a dark stage, they put something and know that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel, and it doesn't all have to be in your own head, and you don't have to get stuck in the cycle. You can focus on getting those small foundation blocks to go on to better things.
And Andre?
Yeah, similar to Behzinga. Growing up as a kid, especially growing up in Brixton, I just felt like a statistic as a kid. Literally, just one more child that will go through the system, maybe get a job, go uni, maybe go jail, maybe, you know what I mean? Just the typical, just stereotype. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be just one more number. I wanted to be something in my life, and I felt sharing my story, being out there, whether people like it or not, people need a person who is decisive, somebody who stands up against the crowd in no matter what way the crowd is facing. And that is the position that I took in my life. And I said, I want to be who I want to be, regardless of what anybody has to say. And if that means doing it through a documentary, speaking my life through a documentary, or using a genre and other people, why not? So yeah, similar to what Behzinga is saying, just being naked. Of course, I'm aware that the internet is here forever, and what you put on the net will last forever. You know, it can affect employment in the future. It could possibly even affect future relationships, but that's good and bad. You know what I mean? I've had a lot of people come up to me and tell me that I've given them confidence, or the stuff that the fact that I've been able to be confident has given them the confidence to be confident. And that beats any criticism or any negative word anyone could ever say about you. So yeah, I'm glad to share my story.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your insights. This was such an interesting chat. I just want to say thank you, all of you, as well, for your questions at home. So it's a shame we can't have a massive clap for you all, but just thank you again to Luke, Kevin, Ethan, Brian and Andre. Indeed. Thank you. And please go and watch Terms and Conditions, a UK drill story, and How to Be Behzinga on YouTube. Make sure you share it. Make sure you have some interesting insights that you can put in the comments for Luke's satisfaction. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.